This is peak weird girl territory. If you've ever read a book and thought, wow, this woman is absolutely insane, I need to know everything about her, then you are in the right place. Today I'm talking about weird girl books, and if you've somehow avoided this corner of book talk, let me explain. A weird girl book is basically a book centered around a woman who is not quite okay. She's obsessive, unhinged, lonely, angry, self-destructive, morally questionable, socially awkward. She might have a drug problem. She might be a cannibal. Maybe she's making terrible decisions. Maybe she's plotting something. Maybe she's just sitting in her apartment or her house having the most questionable thoughts that you've ever heard of. And we somehow love it. Now, these aren't exactly books where the protagonist is always likable. They're books where she's interesting. They explore female rage, identity, grief, isolation, sexuality, friendships, mental spirals, and basically things that we don't really say out loud. So today I've put together 10 weird girl books you need to read in 2026, ranging from dark and disturbing to completely unhinged. Okay, so I'm going to range the books from strange, stranger, to what the did I just read? So the first book is My Husband by Maud Ventura. This book follows an unnamed woman who has been married to her husband for years, and she is obsessed with being the perfect wife and maintaining a perfect relationship. She has an elaborate system of rules, tests, routines, and little mind games that she plays to make sure her husband still loves and desires her. She's very calculating, controlling, obsessive, insecure, and constantly analyzing every single tiny interaction with her husband. And you're like, girl, get a hobby. But then you're like, wait, but I kind of understand her. I think this is a really sharp exploration of marriage, female desire, perfectionism, insecurity, and the lengths that people go to feel loved. And I promise the ending of this book will have your jaw on the floor. The second book on the list is one I actually just finished recently, is Annie Bot by Sierra Greer. I loved this one. This is about Annie, who was an AI robot girlfriend created for her owner, Doug. She's designed to learn his preferences, his desires, his wants, his needs, keep him company, and most importantly, keep him happy. As the story unfolds and Annie starts developing her own wants, opinions, and sense of self, this is such a great weird girl book because Annie is literally learning how to be a woman through the expectations placed on her. She's trying to understand love, jealousy, desire, independence, and what it means to truly belong to someone. All while Doug seems to be insecure and struggle with the fact that she might have a mind of her own. It's creepy, it's sad, it's surprisingly emotional, and it raises some really interesting questions about relationships and the way women are expected to make themselves feel smaller and easier and more accommodating to the people around her, aka men. Number 3 on the list is Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder. I love this book, and if you're a mom, I think it will really resonate with you as well. Our narrator basically says, what if I don't want to be a mom anymore, and turns into this feral creature. So it follows an unnamed protagonist who is a former artist who has put her career on hold to stay at home with her young son. She's extremely exhausted, isolated, resentful, and frustrated by the repetitive thanklessness, mundane routine of being a stay-at-home parent. Then one day, she starts to suspect that she's actually turning into a dog. And as her physical transformation begins, she begins embracing this new animalistic side of herself. The book takes all these messy and uncomfortable feelings about being a mom, like rage, boredom, identity loss, isolation, loneliness, and the feeling of losing yourself, and it turns them into this bizarre, surreal situation of turning into this wolf-like creature. This is a really fun book, but I just feel like it explores so many topics that women do feel when they become moms. Number 4 on the list is My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Queen Otessa Moshfegh. She is one of the pillars, I feel like, in weird girl books. She writes such bleak, bizarre stories. And this book is basically if your idea of self-care is locking yourself inside your home and taking an absolutely irresponsible amount of prescription sleeping medication, then this book is for you. My Year of Rest and Relaxation follows our unnamed protagonist, who is a young, beautiful, privileged woman living in New York City in the year 2000. She's wealthy, she's educated, she's beautiful, and seemingly has everything going for her, but she is completely disconnected from her entire life. And her solution to this is basically to sleep for an entire year and emerge a brand new person. With the help of a questionable psychiatrist and a plethora of prescription drugs, she attempts to hibernate for an entire year. And again, she's not exactly a very likable protagonist, and that is the point. She's selfish, detached, judgmental, cruel, and incredibly privileged. But that's what makes part of this book so fascinating. You're not necessarily supposed to be rooting for her. You're watching someone deliberately withdraw from the world while trying to figure out why she feels so empty in the first place. I don't know why I love this book so much. I think because maybe it's my Taurus astrological sign, but whenever I have some type of problem or I'm stressed or I'm overwhelmed, I'm going to sleep. I want to lay down, I want to go to sleep. So, her wanting to sleep for an entire year to emerge a new person, I was like, I feel you. I understand. Next on the list is Bunny by Mona Awad. This cannot be a weird girl book list without mentioning Bunny. This might be one of my favorite books of all time, and it was definitely a catalyst into my weird girl book obsession. The story follows Samantha, who is a lonely MFA student at a prestigious university, and there is a clique of wealthy, annoying girls in her program that she absolutely cannot stand. They call each other Bunny, they wear matching outfits, and they pretty much just exist in their own little world. Then, against her better judgment, Samantha gets invited to one of their infamous gatherings, and things start to get very, very weird. So, what starts as a story about a lonely outsider who gets pulled into this friend group turns into this nightmare fever dream esque of rituals, obsession, friendship, girlhood, unaliving men, bunnies, and you get the gist. This is peak weird girl territory. Samantha is bitter, lonely, jealous, imaginative, and increasingly unable to tell where reality ends and her own imagination begins. It's also an interesting look at female friendships and the desire to feel wanted and belong. And I don't want to explain too much of this book because the fun part is going into this book pretty blind and thinking you have some things figured out, but then realizing you have no idea what's going on. And I love that she ended the book with a pretty ambiguous ending. I have discussed this book with other people on Book Talk, and they gave me their theories of the ending. I gave them mine. So you really can just kind of interpret it in the way that you want to. Okay, so we're gonna go a little darker now. All's Well by Mona Awad. This reads similar to Bunny in the sense that it's very fever dream-esque. So if Bunny is asking, what if academia was a fever dream? All's Well is asking, what if chronic pain, Shakespeare, and revenge got together and decided to ruin everyone's day? The book follows Miranda, a former actress who is now a theater professor after a mysterious injury leaves her in constant debilitating pain. She desperately wants to direct a production of Shakespeare's All's Well That Ends Well, but everyone around her is like, no, we're not doing that. Like, just give it up, sister. And then Miranda meets these three strange men that seem to just appear out of nowhere, and they seem to understand exactly what she's going through. This book dives into chronic pain, disability, female anger, gaslighting, bodily autonomy, academia, and the frustration of being trapped in a body that people don't understand. Miranda is bitter, unreliable, angry, and increasingly unhinged, and it just spirals into this descent into madness. This is such a great weird girl book and book in general. I highly recommend it. It's so entertaining while also exploring such heavy topics. Next is one of my all-time favorite books, which is Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. I saw someone on social media refer to this book as the female American Psycho, and now I can never unsee that. So this book follows Irina, a young woman living in Newcastle, and she has built her life around photography, drugs, and her own carefully curated image. And she is not a good person. She's manipulative, narcissistic, cruel, and she's convinced that she's the smartest person in every room. And as the story progresses, her behavior becomes wildly unhinged. I just love that this book really plays into the ideas of the male gaze, beauty, sexuality, and objectification, particularly what happens when a woman decides to turn the gaze back onto men. And this one gets dark. There are some extremely disturbing scenes and themes, so definitely check your trigger warnings, but also check your trigger warnings on all of these. Next is also a recent favorite, which is Lapvona by Otessa Moshfegh. If you want a weird girl book that will turn into a grotesque, medieval, deeply disturbing territory, Lapvona is the book for you. The story is set in a fictional medieval village that's plagued by famine, disease, religion, cruelty, and it follows a group of deeply messed up characters living under the rule of a sadistic lord. And at the center of the story is Malik, who is a physically disabled shepherd's son, whose life is already miserable enough, but then it just gets much, much worse. And this book gets weird, okay? There's violence, bodily fluids, starvation, a horse eyeball situation, some truly disturbing behavior. It is a grotesque book that is grotesque for the sake of being grotesque, okay? But underneath all of the weirdness, I feel like Otessa Moshfegh really explores power, poverty, religion, suffering, cruelty, and the ways people can justify doing terrible things. This book absolutely belongs on the weird girl book list. The entire novel feels like someone had a nightmare after reading a textbook on medieval villages, essentially. And last on our list, number 10 is Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. Okay, and if you want a weird girl book that starts off as strange and then just goes absolutely fucking bonkers, Earthlings is one of the ultimate choices. This story follows Natsuki, a young girl who feels completely alienated from the world around her. She becomes convinced that she is a magical girl from another planet. She finds an escape from everything in her cousin Yu, who she believes is a fellow alien. She becomes increasingly convinced that society is forcing people to follow a script that they never agreed to, like getting married, having children, working 9 to 5s, behaving normally, and becoming a productive member of society. Which, okay, fair, but she wants absolutely none of that. What begins as a quirky, surreal story about childhood imagination becomes incredibly dark. This book goes into abuse, trauma, sexuality, family dysfunction, and societal expectations. It's also another book I genuinely recommend going in a little blind. The less you know, the better, because the story does take some wild turns. This book has extremely dark undertones. It's very bleak. It's very strange. So, of course, check trigger warnings for this one. And that brings us to the end of the list of 10 weird girl books you need to read before the end of 2026. What is the most bizarre, disturbing, and unhinged book you have read? Hi, my name is Nikki, and if you like weird, dark, and disturbing books, make sure you subscribe to my channel.